Let's see. What advice would you give to someone who is studying journalism but would like to get into fashion journalism? How would you advise they go on about it? I mean, I talk about this a lot, but one of the first things you can do is start pitching to magazines. But before you even start trying to pitch to magazines, obviously magazines want to see some writing that you've done before. So you kind of have to start small and work your way up. So I started writing for smaller magazines at the start, and then I would pitch to mid-level magazines, I guess. And then I use those articles to start pitching to the BOFs and the Vogues and all those kind of publications. But I think it's really all about pitching. But before you even start trying to write for fashion publications and all that sort of stuff, or make your own fashion publication, I think it's good to practice. It's good to give yourself time, maybe start a blog. It could be anywhere, on Twitter, you could start a Substack, it could be your website, but just kind of something that gets you into the practice of writing a few articles a day and gets you into that mode, and then you can start pitching. But I know fashion seems very mysterious, but a lot of editors of magazines, you can find their emails online quite easily, actually. That's what I did. That's how I know who to pitch to. So that would be my advice. And then obviously just like learn about fashion, read about it every day. I read about fashion every single day. The first thing when I wake up is open all the tabs of all the different magazines and all the different publications and read all the fashion news stories to stay up to date. And I do that every single day. So that would be my advice. Regardless of democratization of info/access to platforms, it feels the industry is becoming harder to access by people from lower income backgrounds. How do you think this shift may affect the fashion landscape? I think without being like mean, I genuinely think that most, if not all, definitely not all, I'm just joking, most good art comes from people from working class backgrounds, because I think that, which kind of sounds twisted, but trauma and the kind of life experience that comes with being working class sometimes leads to a lot of good art. Like if you think of some of the most interesting fashion designers of all time, like the Gallianos, the McQueens and all that sort of stuff. Even like Balenciaga was not from a rich family, like Cristobal Balenciaga I'm talking about. So it tends to be the case that, and also I think when you're working class, you almost have like a chip on your shoulder where you have to overprove yourself to be accepted in a space that's full of upper class people, which lends people to being better in general. Like it makes for most working class designers you see are always better because they feel like I need to do this and this and this to keep up, whereas the rich kid is just doing the absolute bare minimum. So I think if anything, if fashion becomes a place that, you know, the only designers that make it are rich people, I think all the brands will just be horrible, and I think that they'll be uninspiring, to be honest. I think that's kind of what will happen. Unfortunately, fashion is an industry where everything is a bit fake. It's like, yeah, we're so sustainable. It's like, no, you're not. Yeah, we believe in diversity. It's like, not really. Like, I know that everyone can see the models on the runway, so you make it diverse. But if we look at your team, your editorial team, your marketing team, and we see the demographic, clearly diversity is not like a thing that you care about, which is fine, but like, don't pretend. What I don't like is pretending. If things are something, then okay, cool, at least we know it's something. But it's the pretending that really annoys me with fashion sometimes. Like even me, for example, I had to have such an unconventional way into fashion because I'm not some rich kid that had, like, my mum is not Kate Moss. Like, my mum is not just gonna, like, bolster me and chuck me into the industry and I'm gonna have all this success. So I had to, like, know that, okay, the typical person that worked at British Vogue, which was the biggest magazine in the UK at the time, I can't fit in there because every single person on the editorial team is white, literally. So there's no space for me there. So I have to do the whole, I'm gonna make a YouTube channel and then, like, go into the industry, like, all the way around to get in. So yeah, I just hope it doesn't keep going that way because I think that it will affect creativity. I genuinely think that most like super rich people are the most uncreative people you've ever seen in your life. Obviously, there are a few people that are, but if we're talking on average, yeah, we're gonna make fashion stale.
And just to, echo what you're saying as well, it's like, I'm not trying to say that rich people can't create art, but part of what Ayo was saying was the ingenuity that comes from not having funds creates some great art and great spectacles because you're just without means and you just have to make it do as however you can. And there's a lot of value in that, especially from people who are from downtrodden backgrounds, or let's just say people who are from backgrounds who aren't the greatest. And yes, the industry isn't made for people who are from that place, which is why they are championed culturally. And someone there said grills are works of art, right? And I know they were being funny, but at one stage in sentiment, it's like, yeah, like there was a lot of black culture, black American culture that was like ousted from, you know, just the conventional art practice and art realm in America. So then they had to create their own culture of art, and they had to find value in their own artists and all of these other things up until Basquiat. Right. And now you've got all of these Basquiat clones, but at the same time, it's like there was so much value that was there that now when it comes to, let's say, black hairstyles and now black dandyism, all of these things are now being championed. Back then, it was probably the worst of the worst, right? And just to talk about us contemporarily, it's like, yeah, it's like the industry isn't made for us. Like, who has time to buy £1,000 worth of sewing machines, £1,000 worth of fabric, all of these other things? You have to work a part-time job, all of these things, just to make ends meet, as well as do your university degree. Those things are just difficult. Like, and in terms of, and you know, let's say art supplies as well, you have to buy paints, you have to buy brushes, you have to buy canvases, you have to buy whatever it is you want to create. So it's like all of these things, yeah, it's hard for some of us to be able to work and create art, but those of us that are, or create fashion, but those of us that are, it happens to have some great ingenuity in it, and people think about fabrics differently. Just to use the Galliano example again, he was dyeing fabrics in, I believe it was, like, there's so many different stories that I've heard, but it was a sink or a bathtub.
Yeah.
And
sleeping on his friends' couches, literally. And like doing like,
that's the ingenuity that we're talking about. So yeah,
rich people used to be the ones creating great art. It's a shame that is no longer the case. So guys, write in the chat who you think the greatest designer of all time is. Obviously, there's no such thing because designers are great for different reasons. Or write down your favorite designer. And I'm sure if we did a tally, most of them will be from working class backgrounds. Even if like historically, like the couturiers, a lot of them were from like rich backgrounds. Like Elsa Schiaparelli was like kind of well off. I mean, Christian Dior is definitely well off. But if you do like the maths, you'll see that actually rich people are not as inspiring as you think. Even though they have all the resources historically, still, when you think of like who were the most influential designers, like Cristobal Balenciaga, Alexander McQueen, Vivienne Westwood, John Galliano, like working class.
Yeah, and you have to think some of these people were plucked, right? Every one of the great stories is that these people were plucked from obscurity into a world that they had to now navigate. And you know, when we talk about the Warhol example, he was plucked. When we talk about the McQueen example, he was plucked. Galliano was plucked. Balenciaga, Cristobal was plucked, right? And the wealthy benefactor of the working class person is a trope that has been going on for centuries now, right? And in terms of fashion, like when we start talking about the royal, you know, artisans and all these other people, they weren't necessarily rich people, and the royal painters weren't rich people. They were people that had a point of view, that wanted to paint for the wealthiest class, and you know, most of them were plucked from obscurity. But yeah,
someone said Madeleine Vianney. Madeleine Vianney was also working class, by the way, for people that don't know. As far as I know, if my fashion history knowledge is doing me well, I swear she was from like a poor family. And she's also one of the most influential fashion designers of all time. Like the bias cut, like do not play with me. Like if you do the maths, working class people in fashion are way more like influential in terms of like better designers on average than like rich or wealthy people that grow up wealthy. So that's what I mean. Like creativity, if you tally it, most good creativity doesn't come from like upper class people. I just genuinely think, I don't know why that, I need to actually study that deeply, but I genuinely think part of it is to do with like, if you grow up in life and life is too easy, it's hard for you to like channel nothing into like creativity, if that makes sense. Like, Dami, do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. I'm listening, yeah.
Like there's a certain life experience that comes with being working class that you can use to channel into creativity. And I think if you grow up too rich, you don't have that life experience in a way.
Yeah, and not to, you know, single out trauma, but it's like there is that also level of ingenuity. Like, you know, someone said shout out to Dapper Dan. Like Dapper Dan used his ingenuity as a stylish person to cut out bags, you know what I'm saying, or to cut up, you know, Louis Vuitton fabric and so on and so forth, and create a hustle out of it. A lot of people that are overcoming this adversity of low funding with ingenuity is being able to create a hustle out of the thing that you're creating. And that is why, you know, in terms of people that come from a lower class background, or not lower class, but people that come without funds, they are championed demand for being able to sell their prints or to be able to create an audience and all of these things that we're able to do today. But yeah, like I agree with your point in terms of that, because you actually need to channel something that is valuable to a large group of people. Because if you just think about it in like technical terms, you do need to create an audience for this art, and the best art makes people feel things, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, and if you're channeling your feelings that aren't attached to so many people, if only like 0.001% of people understand, you know, you going to the Alps and you breaking a nail when you're on the ski slopes, if that is your art, fine, but like 99.999% of people can't relate to that, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, I don't think talent comes from struggle or upbringing. Talent is just innate. I don't agree with that, because then why, once again, like I just said with the designers, if you think of like the most influential designers of all time and you tally it, you can see a through line there. So why is that then? Is it just that more working class people innately are more creative? Like, how does that happen? Someone made a point that was, it was culture. This is a really good point. I know that if your idea is to bring something new or underexplored, but the ruling class is based on things staying the same in general. That's a really good point. That's a very, very good point.
So this is the thing, right? What is staying the same? Because when we create art, it's not to, let's say, defund or kick people off their pedestals, you know, stop billionaires being billionaires. It's so that people can have upwards mobility more of the time. We want upwards mobility and they have the resources. So it's an exchange that happens. So as much as you want change from, let's say, the bottom, let's say, you know, you want minimum wage to be £15 an hour, as much as like you can want that, there's an avenue for that just so happens to be social change and not necessarily, oh, I'm creating art. Like, yeah, you're creating art for the social good and to change people's minds and perspectives, but you're not necessarily changing much in terms of, oh, these people that are in power need to leave power. You're saying the bureaucracy that is in place needs to change our living conditions, which is it's getting nuanced right now, but that is this shift in the sentiment that allows for stuff to stay the same, but also people to have upwards mobility in terms of the value that we're creating now. If someone who has a law degree and they're going to the Department of Work and Pensions, or they're going to Universal Credit and they have to get on Universal Credit because they can't find a job in law, that's pain. They're gonna have to do something about that. And now if an artist who knows how to channel all of that pain into something, then yeah, you're gonna get some great art that is valuable to certain people, because just as much as the other artists can feel that pain of, oh, I got this degree, people said, oh, if I get a degree I can get a job, the person who got the law degree, the engineering degree, the doctorate degree, I know a guy right now who's working retail and he's done like 10 years worth of 5 years worth of education to be a pharmacist, but they're still working a minimum wage job. You get what I'm saying? And so they're going to understand it just as the other people that are working minimum wage are going to understand it. Everyone understands that hustle to do what you would love to do for the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying?
I do think, because I do agree with this point that the talent didn't come from the fact they were born poor, they're just innately talented. I half agree. I think an upbringing can shape someone's point of view, but taste and an eye for something equals innate. I think part of it can be your upbringing, because I know that when in my head I decided that I wanted to be in fashion, I felt personally that I was so far away from the typical archetype of someone that works in fashion. Like, I'm a man, I'm not gay, I'm not white, I'm not like all these things that, like, when I looked at most people that worked in fashion, that was the archetype. So I was like, I need to like really study fashion to make sure that people don't use, oh, this guy's black though, so like, and people still do it now. Like, there's times where I might say something and people be like, I don't want to hear a straight man talk about fashion. Like, people literally say that all the time. So I feel like that side of me made me want to go harder, and it's to the point now where like I might go to Fashion Week and just start talking about like something that happened historically in fashion. Also, I did study fashion journalism, so that's also part of my education, but I might be talking about something with someone and they'll be like, what even is that? And this is someone that like, they work for the brand, and I'm telling them something about the history of the brand that they work for, and they work high up in that brand. They don't know what I'm talking about. And every time that happens, I'm like, but like, you work for the brand and you're head of marketing, but you don't know about the history of the brand. So like, I do think that some of it is nurtured. Like sometimes if you're from a working class background or you're not as fortunate, you almost feel like you need to go harder to kind of reach the same level or to tally the same, which is definitely how I felt. So I don't think that all of it is innate. I do think that some of it definitely comes from like upbringing and circumstance. Like Alexander McQueen didn't, wake up from the bed being one of the greatest pattern makers we've ever seen. Like he had to go to Savoy, he had to, work for Romeo and all these things. He didn't just wake up from his bed and just like have those skills, right? So I think it's both. I do think there is a level of innate skill and taste and creativity, but I do think your life experience nurtures it to an extent also.
Yeah, it has to nurture it, fam. Like if you've got a 200 square foot place, but you really want to be an art director or you want to be a creative director, and you only have this one corner of your room to make your videos or to make your pictures, you're gonna do like the way that if it burns in your chest the fact that you can't do it, versus and then people that are also from your background see that, oh, the BTS, that's why BTS became such a big thing, because how were you creating this thing? You know what I'm saying? Like there's a girl that was on TikTok that literally was making some of the best art direction people had seen in her bedroom, but then versus the person who can get their parents, or they can get investors to invest in their business and then hire the best people out of university or whatever it is, and now they've got £100,000 worth of equipment and some of the best staff from CSM or wherever it is, right? And then now they've started their business, and it's like, oh, now this person has a great eye for talent, all of these other things. Okay, yeah, you hired some great amazing people that couldn't do what you could do, but you also had the resources to do that. So if you were unable to do that, it looks worse on you because you had all the resources and failed. It's funny, like we have all of these jokes, right? But fashion is full of nepo babies, one, and then two, when it comes down to it, it's like there is a value system at play, and we are leaning into the value system because a bunch of us that don't come from this upper class background do want, or let's say from a well-to-do background, do want to get hired at these places, and it's just one of those things, and those people are going to stay rich because we've had to have ingenuity and be able to have hustle to be able to get to that place, and that just kind of is what it is. It's like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.